This is the Church of St Andrews in South Tawton. The church dates back to the 15th century, although there was a lot of renovation work carried out in the Victorian period. Alongside the church is the old church house. Now this is referred to as the Tudor building, 15th century, still very original inside, and it's open to the public on a Sunday so you can view it. The porch was a later addition, that's only 16th century. And we'll have a look inside the church now. On the wall we have a list of the clergy of this parish, and they go right back to the year 1262. Above that is a board detailing the charities of South Tawton, and some of the dates on there go back to 1715. Not easy to read from the ground level here by the human eye. This is to the Reverend William Moore, who was rector of this parish, and he died in 1799. Here lieth the body of Thomas Barrishill of Drews Tawton, gent, who was buried 2nd of June 1728. And close by is his wife, Afra. She died a year earlier, 1727. We've lost the name on this one, but we know that he died in February the 19th, 1730 something, and he left £5 for the poor of the parish forever. This one is very high on the wall of the church and quite impossible to read with the human eye. I'm hoping the camera will give you a better view of the inscription. This one too is very hard to read. It's also quite faded, but notice the family crest at the top. And as we pan down underneath the inscription, we have these two skulls. Another one that's quite impossible to read here from the ground level. A very interesting one, which shows two figures kneeling at the top, and then underneath we have other figures. Looks like 6 male figures on the left and 2 female figures and a cot on the right. Now that usually signifies they are the children of the 2 at the top. There is a date which is 1651, and there are some initials underneath those figures, and 1 or 2 have skulls underneath them. So presumably they were dead in 1651, and those that didn't have the skulls were presumably still living. There's just above the 1651 on the left hand side, there's something interesting lying horizontally. There's quite a story to be read into this. I'm afraid I don't have enough knowledge to go any further than that. At one side of the church we have this figure of a gentleman with his hands clasped together, and his feet appear to be resting on a duck, and the date is 1592. I don't see a name on it at the moment. No doubt we could look that up. There are 2 other memorials here, but it's a very dark corner of the church and they're in a dark material. I can see the surname on this one is Wicks Finch. Wicks Finch. And the one adjoining it, with its heraldic crest at the top, is the same surname. Another one very high on the wall, John Steer, gent, who died in 1792. This one has got in brass, which is always difficult to get an image on. The name is Sophia Curson, and the one beneath that also is in polished brass, and it's John Rupert Clark. Canadian infantry, fell in action, looks like in France in 1916. If I move a little bit, maybe you can read more of the inscription. Not easy with the reflecting lights. Very high on the wall again, with a family crest, is John Oxenham, I think. It's not easy from here. 1770 something. And for me, the most important memorial here is the 14 young men, some will even be boys, who gave their lives in the First World War. And beneath that, and partially covered, so difficult to see, are the 6 names of the heroes who died in World War II. The church is famous for its ceiling, very beautifully made barrel-type ceiling, and so many carefully engraved bosses with depicting different figures. It's very dark, and I doubt whether we can pick much of them out with the camera. There really is a lot to see in this church. This stone on the floor, 1737. 300 years it's been lying there. This one is dated 1653. And as we pan up, there's all sorts of different hieroglyphics carved into the stone, presumably signifying something to somebody. That is such an interesting church internally. We're now going to wander up through the graveyard. It's been left as a nature reserve, so the grasses have been allowed to grow long. I'd like to see that. We'll see what we can find in interesting memorials. Against the church wall, this is Elizabeth Ford, who died in July 1640. And also the body of Elizabeth Ford, widow and mother of the above. And she was buried in 1680. Against the church wall again, the body of John, the son of John and Elizabeth Oxenham, 1708. Susan, the beloved wife of James Cottle, 1936, age 72, and James, her husband, who died just 6 years later. A number of these stones have this open book at the top. Seems to be the signature of the local stonemason. Annie, the beloved wife of William Knapman, the smith of South Tawton, 1925, aged 42. We have another Knapman, Elizabeth Ann, the wife of Richard Knapman, a smith, 1867. It appears the Knapmans were smiths in this town for a couple of generations. And right behind we have a Mary Knapman, the wife of William Knapman, a smith, 1852. There's an area here for memorial stones. These are usually people that have been cremated. They'd like to have a stone to remember the person. And you can see just what a picturesque graveyard this is, with all the wildflowers and wild grasses growing up. Mary Isaac of this parish, 1842, aged 30 years. And then her grandchildren, Mary Louisa Isaac, aged 4 years and 7 months. Anna Maria Isaac, aged 14 months. Lydia Jane, the wife of John Northcott of South Zeal in this parish, died in 1900, aged 54, and then her husband, who died 17 years later. And here, almost hidden by the grass, here Elizabeth of Thomas. I can't read the rest of that except the date is 1703. This is to Edward, the son of Samuel and Mary Crocker of South Zeal, 1838, aged 3 years. And then we've got memory of Edward Bivins, their son, who died in 1841, aged 6 years. And likewise the memory of the aforesaid Mary Crocker. Samuel doesn't get a mention, but if he was the last of the family, maybe there was no one to ensure he got his name on the memorial. There are 2 children mentioned here. George Glanfield, 1842, aged 1 year, and Anne Glanfield, 1853, aged 10 years. This memorial is made of a different stone from most of them, and it commemorates George, the son of Samuel and Mary Jackman, 1860, aged 4 months. In loving memory of our father and mother, John and Susan Beer, 1857, 1876, aged 97 and 70 years. And then it names their 10 children: Elizabeth, Mary, John, Susan, Anne, Amelia, William, Eliza, James and Hannah. And at the bottom, affectionate son and brother, William. We've got a complete family tree there. We've got 3 large crosses here, and then 3 horizontal stones over there, and they're all to various members of the Lethbridge family. So I'm suspecting they were landowners in the area to have such a prominent spot and so many memorials. And immediately behind we have other Lethbridges. This is Frances Helen Lethbridge, wife of Charles Raleigh Bruere Knight and daughter of Henry Lethbridge Kingsford Lethbridge, 1966. And if we move back, we've got other Lethbridges there: Armstrong Lethbridge, Wingsford Lethbridge, Meenan Elizabeth Kingsford Lethbridge, and that one's Passmore, but as it's right next to them, I suspect there's a family connection there as well. So Lethbridge name is very prominent in this part of the graveyard. Up at the top of the graveyard there's a sort of extension piece, and this is where the modern graves are, and they've kept this mown, presumably because people still come back to attend to them. Beautiful spot. This one to Leslie Joseph Honor Fowler and his wife. At the top we've got 3 sheaths of wheat. Unless there's a religious significance, I'm suggesting he was probably in the farming business. Another modern stone to Gillian Healy, 1999, but at the top They've engraved a cottage amongst the trees. Is that where she lived? Was her home? And this to Rachel Ann Clark, 2003. At the top we have this very large butterfly. Was that her interest in life? No doubt about what their interest was in life. Gerald Jeffrey, Eileen Jeffrey. This is a war grave to Thomas James Cottle, Private, 8th Devon Regiment, killed on active service, 16th of October 1940, aged 20 years. John Bevan of Oxenham Quarry, 1892, aged 68, and then his wife, who died in 1908. This is to Philip Travail of Oxenham, a smith, I think it says, 1904. But what struck me was the carving at the top of the stone. Very elaborate, much more detailed than most of the other stones in the graveyard. This is a war grave to Albert James, known as Bert, the husband of Lillian Wright, died August the 21st, 1941, aged 26 years. This stone is much smaller than most of the others around it. There's a swirling design on the top, which may be a lily flower, and it's in memory of Florence A.T. Holman, 1904, aged 18 years. This graveyard is a really magical place. The massive wildflowers, and I'm seeing butterflies amongst them. It's just so peaceful. Wonderful spot. A larger stone than most, the memory of Samuel Stanbury, son of Joanna Stanbury, linen draper of South Zeal in the parish. And then he comes down to 1817. Now, no mention of her husband, his father, and the fact that she was trading as linen draper makes it particularly interesting. The memory of John Ballamy of this parish, who died August 1812, aged 40 years. And underneath we have, "Farewell, my wife, children dear, whom I have left behind, unto the God of Israel's care, who is merciful and kind." Well, I'm going to leave South Tawton at this point. This is a wonderful spot. I can't recommend it enough. The church is fascinating inside, and then the churchyard, the way it's been left as a wildflower resource, it's just wonderful. It's a really lovely spot. Till the next time.